Hello, and you're listening to Your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
This Four-Eyed Radio production is brought to you by America Joy Print Shop. All your printing needs taken care of in one convenient place. Visit americajoy.com for business cards, flyers, banners, decals, car wraps, and more. Visit americajoy.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my work, 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
The name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks. And with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios, from Science and Beer, and from many other shows on The Fern, the Four-Eyed Radio Network. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, where we discuss bondage, James Bondage, all things bondage. And tonight we're going to specifically be discussing the movie Skyfall.
Oh, yeah.
Now, first off, those of you who have been regular listeners to our show may have noticed something a little bit different when I introduce myself. My site has previously been known as Doom Cheese Cinema, and I recently made a name change. Everything else is still the same. You'll find all the same material is up there. Same reviews, same interviews, same charming critic. Just a different name that's a little bit more palatable for something beyond B-movies. So I do hope you will come visit me at cinemaontherocks.com. You can also find me on Twitter at cinemaotr, and you can drop me an email at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com.
Woohoo! Yeah, the site looks great, so definitely go check that out. cinemaontherocks.com. A lot of great content there. Still, the same content that was there before, but better and more tastier. That's the thing, right? More tastier.
Sure. Why not? I think I heard it in a commercial once.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, yes, definitely check that out, guys. It's pretty cool. You got a lot of great reviews on there. A lot of stuff that's, especially the web series stuff. Anybody who's listening to us is probably into web-based entertainment, such as podcasts and web series. And you've got a lot of great reviews and interviews and stuff with web series and web series creators. So definitely a great thing to check out, because that's something that I think a lot of other movie review sites fall short on, is getting those web series and things like that reviewed as well. So definitely check that out. Definitely do that.
Yeah, 10 miles an hour down the driveway on Sundays. No, sorry. No, we will not be talking about Rain Man today. And in fact, I don't have a review up for it. I haven't seen that movie in about 15 years. And to be honest, I don't know that I'm going to see it anytime soon again. However, what we did just watch again recently was the, at least as of this moment, last in the James Bond series, Skyfall.
Yes. Just right off the top, got to say, fantastic movie. Absolutely loved it. Definitely a great addition to the Bond franchise. I found it very, very entertaining, action-packed, good story, great acting, great music. I mean, just all around. I'm going to gush about it quite a bit, I think. I think, honestly, given a few more watchings, this could possibly supplant GoldenEye as my favorite James Bond movie. It'll take some time. It'll take some time, because I'll need to have watched it at least as many times as I've seen GoldenEye, and that's a lot of times. I'll tell you that right now.
How are you ever going to supplant the image of Famke Janssen, though?
That in itself would never be supplanted. That for sure will remain in my my pubescent fantasy world section of my brain pretty much forever. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. And that's one thing where I think Skyfall, actually one of the few places where I think Skyfall falls a little short. I was not a big fan of the ladies in this particular film. Not that they're bad looking or anything like that, but nothing jumped out at me and said, "Oh, there's no Famke. There's no Famke, and there was no Eva Green in this one." So
Well, that's setting the bar pretty high there with Eva Green.
Yeah. I mean, between the two of them, you pretty much, there's no coming back from that. But there were it was definitely very well acted. I mean, you didn't have anyone there who was just there purely for eye candy and couldn't act their way out of a paper bag. You actually had quality acting in this film. So definitely a great movie.
I will agree that is definitely a great movie. Definitely one of the better entries in the series. I do think it's fantastic. I'm not going to gush about it quite as much as you are, because I did find some flaws in it. However, the flaws that I found, I also find that I don't much care about unless I'm really thinking about them. And the way that this movie presents itself makes it very easy to not think about the flaws.
I can agree with that. I'm not trying to say that this is a perfect movie. I mean, even when we talked about GoldenEye, which is my favorite, I was willing to point out where it did go wrong, but it's not going to make me like the movie any less because it is so well done around it. I mean, yeah, there are some things, some places, some things in the movie that maybe a little bit over the top or a little bit outside of, reality when you're going through, when you've got the storyline set so, fairly realistically up until a point, and then all of a sudden you're like, we're going to veer off, far left over here, then it gets a little, but still good.
Yeah. One thing that I find very interesting is that I remember before Skyfall came out, when they just first announced the title, and you had a whole bunch of people speculating about what Skyfall could have meant, and all of them were wrong. Like, some people were thinking, it's another weather control satellite. I've heard this term before. But one thing I remember Barbara Broccoli saying specifically was that they were not going to make Skyfall into part of a trilogy. They wanted to make sure that this was a standalone independent film. And what everyone thought she was referring to at the time, and what I'm sure she thought so too, was this was not going to be another Quantum movie. Quantum was absolutely not going to figure into this at all. Felix Leiter was not going to figure into this at all. So we were moving on to what is an independent story from the basic Bond plot that drove Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace.
Right.
However, I think she lied anyway, because this is very definitely part 3 of a trilogy. And that would be the Bond and M trilogy, because this is very, very much a continuing storyline there, I think.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely, I think what they were probably referring to, or what she was probably referring to in that sense, is that the story, the backstory of the actual plot isn't pulled from anything that was laid down in previous movies. But the characters, thankfully, were. I didn't want to see another, we didn't need another reboot. So the fact that the characters were still the same and still had the same relationships with each other, that I thought was fantastic, and especially since we really got to see a lot more of how M, how Judi Dench's M interacts with her agents, and who's considered her quote unquote favorite agent at the time. So it's very, very interesting, I think, to see. And once again, Judi Dench does a fantastic job acting in this movie. It's just phenomenal, and can't complain at all about her performance whatsoever. And I think she was given a really great script to work with too, because I think I think it ends up being just fantastic.
That part I absolutely agree with. In fact, I also agree with, there's an interview with Sam Mendes where he says, really, in the truest sense of the word, the Bond girl of this movie is M. And we're not going to take that to the full Freudian end of things, even though I'm sure Freud would have a frickin' field day with this. But I can agree with that. She is definitely the major focus, not just as, this strong character of M, the head of MI6, but also as the single most important James Bond's life probably ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Being that he never really, when did they say, how old was he when his parents died, they said?
Well, that's another interesting point that I wanted to cover here. They play a little bit with the canon, but not by too much. The general thought is that basically between 9 and 12 years old, that's when he was orphaned. His parents were killed in a mountain climbing accident in the Swiss Alps. His mother was Swiss. And his father was Scottish, and that was something that Ian Fleming wrote in very late He wrote that in tribute to Sean Connery's performance in Dr. No, because originally he had thought of Bond as an Englishman, but had never really codified that. And then after he saw Connery, he was sold and decided to make Bond half Scots. And then he made Swiss the other half, which I thought was quite a very interesting choice, actually. Now, the part that I found odd is that as I remembered the canon, they may have been, killed in a climbing accident, just like they said, at about this time. However, I never got the impression that it was from a family that had enough money to have a gamekeeper. I was always under the impression that they were of much more modest means, and that, in fact, the aunt that Bond went to live with after his parents were killed was the one who had a little bit more money and was able to then get him into Eton on basically her charity and scholarship charity, which made him somewhat of the object of derision to his classmates. And they still touch on that a little bit, but I just didn't picture his parents being wealthy enough to own an estate like Skyfall. I'm not complaining, and I think that since the entire theme of this movie is both death and reinvention, I think it's perfectly fair game. It just seemed an interesting choice.
I can see that. Being that they haven't really delved too much into that aspect of his past in the movies, I think they can get away with it. Obviously it's been expounded more upon in the books, but for the movies, in the movie universe, you don't really get a whole lot of his childhood. I mean, it's just really little bits and pieces here or there. These movies are always much more about the here and now than any past for the characters. You know a little bit, but you don't really care too much because everything's about what's happening right now, right in front of you, and what the plot is, what the plan is, that sort of thing. So I could see why they would feel that they could play a little fast and loose with the history there to make it fit the story they had envisioned for the movie.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not super fast or super loose. It's just a little bit, just a small tweak, but it's something that definitely jumped out at me. And then another thing, while we're talking about Bond's family history, that jumped out at me specifically this last time that I watched it, because I really hadn't paid attention to that particular detail until we started doing our run through the entire series again, is that when we're looking at Skyfall, as in the place Skyfall, and when we are seeing specifically the chapel and the graveyard, we see the names of James Bond's parents. And there's no question, the last name is Bond for both of them. Now, earlier in Quantum of Solace, they touch on a theme that's also been touched on in not only some of the James Bond books by other people, but also throughout the espionage canon. They touch on the idea of the cover name. Like when Mathis is dying in Quantum of Solace, Bond asks, is Mathis your cover name? In other words, the name that they gave you as a legend so that you could work in the intelligence industry, this is not the name you're born with. Mm-hmm. And the assumption that has been made often is that James Bond would have a cover name and that this wouldn't really have been the one he was born with. And yet, both Ian Fleming and now the movies definitely establish this is the name he was born with. Though he himself, when referring to another character, makes a general assumption that this isn't normally the case. So it's just an interesting juxtaposition for me.
I can see that, definitely. I think my theory on that would be that, James Bond is always the epitome of a badass. He's always the guy who's going in there, and even in situations where he should be using a cover, he just doesn't. He's just like, nope, I'm James Bond. You're going to figure it out anyway, so might as well just give you that one. So I think with being that his parents were already dead, with being that he didn't have any siblings or anyone, close to him that his real name could betray for them to take advantage of to try to hurt him, I think that might be why he would have chosen to keep his name. I would assume that they would give you a choice at this point. When you come into the service, they'd be like, okay, do you want a cover name? Do you want an alias? Or do you want to use your own name? And at that point, it's like nothing is tying me to the rest of this, to this name but the name. So why bother changing it?
See, I wouldn't analyze that far, just in terms of I would not imagine be given a choice, but I also don't imagine that the people who make these films expect most of the audience to just dissect it like we are.
Well, and in that line of thought as well, it's kind of like I remember watching a commentary track on Dogma, Kevin Smith's Dogma, and he was pointing out the fact that when Jason Lee's character goes into the building and is going on about how great central air conditioning is, they show the air conditioning vent with little pieces of ribbon tied to it so that you can see the air conditioners on. And Kevin Smith's talking in the commentary about how nobody has ribbons tied to their air conditioning vent in their house, because you know if the air's on because you can hear it and you can feel it. But in a movie, you can't see the air flowing, so you have to tell the audience that the air is on by putting these ribbons there and making them blow around in the breeze. I think this is kind of an example of that. Unless they devote dialogue to it, if they don't put those names on those graves, we don't know what he's looking at. The majority, we would probably know. I mean, me and you, because we're going to be like, oh, yeah, he's obviously visiting his parents' graves. Duh. But other people would be like, whose graves are they? What is this about?
See, that's not the part that strikes me as the most odd/interesting. Because I would think that the parents' names on the graves matching his own would be par for the course. It's more of reflecting back on how the idea of the cover name, which had never really been broached in the films before, in terms of the person's base identity being a cover identity, had come up in Quantum of Solace. So they never had to bring that up, and yet they did. So
maybe it's a known French intelligence thing, right? That's what Mathis was, right? So maybe it's just them, and so that's why he assumed. I don't know. We're reading far more into this than I'm sure even the writers of the movies did.
But it's fun. It's exciting.
Well, yeah. I mean, we wouldn't have a show if we didn't read more into it. We'd be like, hey, did you like the movie? Yeah. You? Yeah. Okay. Bye, guys.
And we thank you in the audience for being just as big a nerds as we are. We appreciate you.
So, basically, that part didn't really jump out at me in that way. Now that you're bringing it up, I can understand. But it didn't take me away from the scene at all, so...
But while we're visiting Skyfall, the location, I do have to say I very much liked Albert Finney playing the caretaker. I thought that was a very nice touch. I've read that Finney was somebody that Cubby Broccoli had always wanted to work with, but never had the chance to. And there was a rumor once upon a time that Sean Connery had been considered for the part, but Sam Mendes shot that down, said we would never even think about that. Because the whole idea is that we're blowing up the past here.
Yeah. It would have been an interesting cameo for sure, but I think it would have been too much. It would have been too, I like the subtle throwback to other movies. Like when Bond is being handed his gun and radio from the new Q, and he's looking at it like, this is it? And Q says, what were you expecting, an exploding pen? Something like that, where it's not so in your face. It's just a little something here or there to tie it back to the other movies without being an obvious, like, hey, remember this guy? Remember this thing? Remember this? Very much more subtle, and I like that. And as awesome as it would be to see Connery in a Bond movie again, I wouldn't want it that way. That would be weird.
I agree. I think it would be. I think Mendes made the right call without even thinking about it. Though, of course, we do have that one major in-your-face throwback, but it's a very nice in-your-face throwback of the DB5.
Yes. Absolutely. This is one of those times where they can get away with it, not only because they don't make it just a throwaway. They don't just be like, oh, he's walking through his garage and choosing, like, oh, he's got 15 different cars here, and look, they're all old Bond cars, look, or something ridiculous like that. No, he's got one car stashed away, and he puts it to damn good use. And we don't have to see him list everything that's in the car. We don't have to see Q say that it's got this and this and this and this and this.
It's expected that we know, so we get the joke when he flips the top off the shifting column and says, "Are we gonna have any problems?" He's like, "Go ahead, eject me. See if I care." We know what the button is supposed to do.
Exactly. Yeah, and the fact that he's able to use, even though the car gets destroyed, which is such a shame because it's a beautiful car, with or without the modifications, it's just a beautiful car. But he gets to use the modifications to the advantage, which is if you think about it in the actual canon of the films, it's not right, because you're like, wait a minute, we kind of forgot that all of that, with Casino Royale, we were supposed to forget that any of that ever happened. We were seeing Bond fresh out of, with his brand new License to Kill and everything.
See, that I'm willing to accept, because
me too.
there's two ways that you can look at it. Either this is a car that was used in the past of MI6 somehow that had nothing to do with Bond, or remember, he won an Aston Martin DB5 in Casino Royale from Dimitrios. Now, of course, the only question then would be, where'd the mods come from? Because Dimitrios had a stock 64 DB5.
Right.
So...
Well, enough time had passed in between the films that he theoretically could have taken it into, Q Branch and said, like, hey, why don't you put the whole package on this for me? But like you said, it could have been someone else's, it could have been a standard issue at the time, and he just squirreled one away or got one passed down to him from a different agent or something like that. Because, they never say specifically that Bond is the only one who gets, the entire Q Branch isn't there just for Bond. Obviously, there's other 00s that need equipment as well. So I'm willing to forgive that as well. It's just one of those things when you think about it, you're like, oh, that's awesome. But wait a minute.
But
no,
I certainly was very happy to see the machine guns being put to use.
Yes. No, that car still is one of my favorite Bond cars ever. And, seeing it again and used so well, like I said, because they didn't, it was kind of in your face as far as it being there and being used and having all the guns and the ejector seat and all that stuff. But it didn't come off as a cheesy in your face. Like
it was not Die Another Day.
Exactly. Thankfully.
It was beautifully done in all respects. And I really liked that when you first saw the car, they played musical cues that I think were actually drawn straight from the Goldfinger soundtrack. If they weren't re-recorded, that they dirtied them up real nice, because they sounded like they would have been recorded. That sounded like a 1964 recording to me.
I would be willing to bet it was probably the same sounds. Either that, or they made a very good effort in making it sound that way, because that's exactly what it sounded like. It sounded like it was the old Bond film. And it was just enough to be like, hey, look, here's this thing. It throws back to these other movies, but we're not going to shove it in your face and make you, like, oh, you have to know what this is, and now we're going to expound upon it in case you don't. No, you either know or you didn't. And if you didn't, it was just a car. And you just assumed, okay, Bond gets fancy cars with guns and stuff, and you moved on. But if you did know, if you were a fan of the series going into it, then it was just a great little, here you go, here's something that you haven't seen for a while.
And that, of course, was the majority of the audience. Like, I went to see Skyfall when it premiered, and just about the entire theater clapped and cheered when the DB5 showed up that first day. That was just one of those, the whole theater gets it moments. It was very cool.
Oh, I love that. That's one thing I miss about not going out to the theaters as often, is having that experience of watching a movie with a full crowd of people who are as into it as I am. And that's something you don't get when you're watching it on DVD or even Blu-ray. It doesn't matter how good the picture is, you don't get that full experience. But holy heck, that experience is so darn expensive these days. I mean, between the ticket prices and if you want to get a drink or popcorn or whatever, everything's so darn expensive. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, but some movies, it is completely worth it, and this definitely was one of them. And yes, now that we're at the home experience, get it on Blu-ray. Don't waste your time on the DVD. This is so beautifully filmed. You really need to see this in the highest definition you can.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you have a Blu-ray player, go for the Blu-ray. I had to go DVD, obviously, because I don't even have a Blu-ray player yet. It's one of those things, I know the second I get a Blu-ray player, then I have to start buying Blu-rays.
They're cheap.
But because Blu-rays are so cheap, DVDs are even cheaper now. It's fantastic. And most of the time,
a Blu-ray player can be found for under $50.
Of course, right now I'm watching all my TV on a 16-inch computer monitor, so it doesn't really make a difference.
Blu-ray drives for computers are even cheaper.
But But once I get a replacement for our good TV that blew out, we'll see at that point, because then we'll have a big screen again to look at. But no, I definitely agree. I'm really glad that I got to see this one in theaters. I saw it actually twice in the theater, which is unheard of for me these days. For me to see anything in the theater is a shock, and then for me to see the same movie twice in theaters is even less heard of. So that tells you how great this movie was, that I was willing to go through, to forego a new movie experience to watch this again in the theaters. I really, really enjoyed this film.
And while we're on the subject of the visuals, the cinematography in this is some of the best in the entire series. And the location scouts just went above and beyond in finding some of the best places they could possibly film and showing them the best ways that they could do it. Like just Istanbul, which we've seen as a classic Bond location, showing it again, except this time in a new light with the chase through the bazaar. Just the way that it's filmed, you really just get the full flavor. And in the background, you have Hagia Sophia, which is one of the most beautiful buildings that mankind has ever produced. That's just outstanding. And I remember seeing an interview where when they were talking about doing the London shots, Daniel Craig was saying, oh yeah, they say they're going to make London look like London. Nothing ever looks like London. And then they shot it, and he saw it, he said, holy shit, this looks like London. The actual experience that someone who lives in London every day feels. So I can't say that myself, never been there, but hey, if Daniel Craig says so, I'm going to take his word for it. But the thing that far and away, also just Skyfall itself, beautiful. Both the actual location and then the fake moors they made in the studio, which you wouldn't even realize were fake because they're so well done. Mm-hmm. But far and away, the best for me were the shots of Shanghai. Holy shit. I mean, just those shots are why you see things in IMAX and high definition. Just the color and the sharpness and just the beautiful framing of the architecture of the city. The lighting, just the way they did the lighting was just outstanding. I would love to have a screensaver that is just the establishment shots of Shanghai from Skyfall.
I'm sure that could be found, especially if you've got the Blu-ray. I'm sure you could get some.
Well, actually, they use that for the menu for the extras section, except they have the word Skyfall written right over the front. Yeah. Just if you could find that just plain and use it as a screensaver, it's just magnificent to look at.
I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But like I said, with the Blu-ray, you possibly get a screenshot of it when it's on that scene. I don't know. I'm sure it can be done. We'll find a way. We will find a way. No, I agree. The cinematography in this, the filming is just absolutely breathtaking. It never takes you out of the story. I hate when movies try to get crazy with the filming, when directors try to get weird with stuff to be like, oh, I'm going to tell my story my way, but it's going to make you not want to watch it anymore because all of a sudden, they use a lot of weird movement or weird angles or things like that just take you out of the story. And that should never be a director's goal, to take you out of the story to make you think about the direction. At least in my mind, that would be...
No, I agree. This is why I'm not as enamored with John Woo as a lot of people are, because I think that his main goal is to write his signature on everything he does.
Yeah. Oh, I like doves. All right, John, we get it. Oh, come on.
Let's flourish the trench coat one more time with two guns.
It's like when it's in certain, sometimes you see certain things that you associate with certain directors, and that's fine because it doesn't take you out of the story. When it actively takes you out of the story, that's when I have a problem with it. And nothing in Skyfall, as far as the filming went, took me out of the story. I never... I will say I was a little confused. The one time when I, at any point in the movie, when I stopped thinking about the story and started thinking about what is going on here, and I don't even think it was the director's fault. It was just that I didn't really get what was going on right at first. It was the scene in the skyscraper, and the lights kept changing colors, and I was like, why would they do that? I don't understand. And then of course they pull back, and you see, oh, there's a billboard across the street that's playing some sort of video advertisement, and it's changing colors. Okay, get it now.
See, I'm going to blame you for that because the establishment shot did show all of that neon and all those color changing. So,
like I said, it's totally not the director's fault on that one, but that was the only moment of the film where I stepped out of the story for a second to wonder to myself, what am I seeing here? And then as soon as you see the jellyfish on the screen in the background. You're like, oh, get it now. All the lights are off, and all you're getting is the light from the billboards. Okay, I'm done. But
those jellyfish looked awesome, by the way.
Yeah, they did. That was a great scene, too. Just that whole, and part of that was because of the way it was lit and because of the color changing throughout the scene, and you didn't see every nitty-gritty detail of the fight, but you knew it was happening and you felt it, even though you couldn't see everything. I thought that was fantastic.
I thought it was too, and another thing that made that work very, very well for me was that Patrice, our bad guy in that scene, never spoke. And he had never spoken in his previous appearances in the film either. He's a totally mute character. And so all you're getting is this presence out of him, and I think that makes him more powerful.
No, I definitely agree, especially since his original goal is to go there and try to get information from him. He's trying to find out who he's working for, and instead he ends up having to kill him, of course, because, he's Bond. Bond's going to do what Bond's going to do, Not that he had much choice in this case, but, he found out pretty quickly that he's not getting anything out of this guy. This guy's not going to give him the information he's looking for, so he had to do it.
Bond will be Bond.
Exactly. No, but yeah, definitely that scene was fantastic, and the scene that follows that in the casino is fantastic as well.
Oh, that is one of my absolute favorite scenes in the movie. And not only for the wonderful interior cinematography, which is very difficult to pull off. Exterior cinematography, I'm not saying is easy, but comparatively, when you have a gigantic natural vista or cityscape to work with, as opposed to the confines of interior space, the confines of interior space are a lot harder to work with.
Absolutely.
And they shot that interior, and really most of the interiors, just as well as they shot all those beautiful vistas we've been talking about. However, my favorite shot in there has to be of Bernice Marlowe. Wow, do I love her costume designer. She looked outstanding.
Yes, it was very, very different take on some of these characters than what we've seen in previous films, too. The characters that they did bring back, finally, characters that we had not seen in Casino Royale or Quantum of Solace, in Q and Moneypenny. They took quite a different take on both of these characters, I think, and I gotta say, I think I like them, both of them.
I like them too, though. What I'm very curious about, and I've been wondering this ever since we started this journey up, is, and especially after our discussion of Die Another Day. Now, we accept that this is a completely rebooted Bond, so all bets are off. So first question, what's your count?
See, I knew this was going to come up, and it's so hard for me. The big question mark, the big question mark is Moneypenny. They're obviously in a situation, he's half naked, she's giving him a freaking straight edge razor shave, which is an extremely...
He's unbuttoning her blouse.
Yes, he's getting her clothes off, but he's not... They don't show them in bed. They don't show them getting out of bed after obvious, sexual relations. You don't see any of those things that you would immediately be, oh, okay, they just did it.
And you also haven't officially been told that she's Moneypenny yet.
Right. Yeah, you don't know exactly what this deal is. So you assume, of course he's going to sleep with her. Whatever. Then you find out that she's Moneypenny, and they do have that kind of little bit of flirty banter back and forth that you get that feeling of that Bond Moneypenny relationship, while different but still there, but still somewhat familiar. But that wouldn't necessarily be right if they had slept together. But I think they leave it very, very open, and I'm not comfortable saying yay or nay, honestly, on that one, because
I'm going to make you say yay or nay.
Then I have to go nay, just on the previous definitions we've described, where it was not blatantly obvious, because there's been other times when we've clashed on numbers because I took implications to mean more than you did. So I'm going to go with your definition this time and say, because it was not blatantly obvious, I'm not going to counter.
Okay, so what's your count?
I believe that puts it to just one.
Okay. My count, I'm going to take your normal position. Not that way.
Oh, how do you know what my normal position is? Who's been talking?
And I'm going to go with 2, because I think they did it. Now, with that said, I think they did it, and I think it's the only time they're ever going to do it. I think it's going to play out much like when you have the thing where you have two people who get along really, really well, they sleep together, and while it's good, they kind of know the relationship isn't going to go anywhere on that vein, so they agree to keep it in the friend zone from now on. And I think that's what we've got here. So I say they did it.
It'll be interesting.
But I think it's the only time they ever will.
If they did, I would agree that it will be the only time. I'm still thinking that they didn't quite get that far. I think it's just extremely heavy flirtation. I think that's as far as it got personally. But it will be interesting to see if in any future films it's mentioned, if anything's ever mentioned that clears that up. It would be very interesting.
I just can't picture that scene getting cut off in any way that isn't really stupid, like the phone ringing or room service showing up or somebody letting out a tremendous fart or something like that.
Oh, sorry about that, honey.
I just
do this.
There's just no way I can picture that scene going anywhere but horizontal.
And I mean, to lend credence to your theory and to destroy my own position a little bit here, later on when she mentions that they're sure to get into one or two more close shaves, as obvious allusion back to that night, it does make it sound like something more happened. But then again, it also could be, my original thought, just extremely heavy flirtation, where maybe she's saying like, oh, you know what almost happened that night, maybe we'll be in that situation again. Ooh. So it's really tough to tell. I'm going to stick with my number for now, though, but like I said, it will be interesting to see if any dialogue in any future movies gives it away, and we have to go back and say, you know, if there's anything definitive, you know, because they could say something could drop at some point that definitely says one way or the other whether it happened or not. So it would be interesting. We'll have to
By the way,
that if it does happen.
Sorry, my count is 3.
Oh, who'd I miss?
You missed the nameless lover that he had when everybody thought he was dead.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Wait, during the Heineken ad. I forgot about that.
Yes, during one of 2 Heineken ads. You had, because that was the one where Bond was drinking Heineken, but you also had Tanner drinking a Heineken later.
That's right. I totally forgot about that, because that was almost just a throwaway shot. It was just him drinking and, you know, being in the obvious company of women. So he probably, I mean, technically the count is probably much higher, because you know he wasn't just with that one girl while he was.
Though that girl was actually put in there very specifically, because she was not originally written in, but the actress had been in the running to play one of the major Bond girls, and I'm going to assume it was a part that originally went to Bernice Marlowe. And they liked her well enough that they wanted to use her somehow, so that's what they came up with.
So they let Bond use her somehow.
I can't say I'm going to complain.
No. Yeah, but I totally forgot about that, yeah, because that was obvious that they had been together, and the chances are most likely that during that time period when he was presumed dead, he was probably, because you could tell he was a regular at that bar, and you could tell he was well respected at that bar, playing the little drinking game with the scorpion there. He was probably...
Very nicely done drinking game scene, by the way. Just seriously, normally when you see those films, it's like, oh, this is all dude bro-y and that kind of thing, yay. But he actually made it look like something other than a frat boy thing. It looked like something you could imagine James Bond doing, as opposed to some frat boy who used to be James Bond.
Yeah, I can see that. No, it was kind of one of those scenes where you see his psyche is such as that he's basically like, I'm already dead, basically, so none of this even mattered. I'm just going to drink all day, screw all night, rinse and repeat. And that's basically what his life was until he finds out that not only England, but specifically MI6 has been attacked. When
he looked at that picture, he would definitely know that it wasn't just MI6, but M's office.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like, first of all, it's like, okay, you know, England, not just England, but London specifically, not just London specifically, but MI6. And then not just that, but specifically M. So yeah, he was coming back.
And I thought that they handled that very interestingly and very well, the scene where he does come back. You have M going into her home, which is actually, by the way, John Barry's home.
Yes, I read
which
that.
I thought was a very, very nice little touch. Of course, for those of you who are first joining us, John Barry was the longtime signature composer for the James Bond movies.
Yes.
And so very, very nice that they chose to honor him in some fashion.
Yeah, I read that they used his former home to be M's home. And I also read that Thomas Newman's score for Skyfall has a lot of people thought he was paying tribute to John Barry quite a bit in that. And I can definitely see that, especially in the scenes we discussed with the car where you actually get some of that original scoring coming out, but also in the rest of the score. I think it was very well done, and it felt very Bondish all the way up.
It was very well done, and I also noticed that at one point you had not only the traditional Monty Norman James Bond music, which of course has been used much more sparingly in the later films, but Monty Norman's arrangement as well. I mean, it was specifically the old arrangement.
Yes.
And it's little touches like that that make me forgive what I originally thought of as a sin committed by Sam Mendes, which was, I mean, there was the one case where Sam Mendes did say, I'm going to do this my way. I'm just going to grab the guy I always work with, was in the choice of Thomas Newman to do the score. Because David Arnold was happy to come back. And he had been, I think a lot of people thought, the logical successor to John Barry, and he had done a fabulous job for all the movies he'd worked on. There seemed to be no reason to get rid of David Arnold except Sam Mendes wanted to work with the guy he normally worked with. Uh-huh. But Newman did a good enough job that I can't hate on it, even though I am kind of disappointed that Arnold wasn't given the chance.
Yeah, it definitely could have been interesting, but I think they did a good job with the people that did that did it. Speaking of the music, though, I got to say I absolutely love the theme song on this one. We're finally back to a song that I not only enjoy the song just by itself, but I also really think it's a Bond song. I absolutely love Skyfall, performed by Adele, and it is probably one of my favorite. Next to, I think it's right up there with the Goldens, Goldfinger and GoldenEye. It's right up there in my top. So, how did you feel about the theme song for this one?
I love the song. I think it is essential Bond in all aspects. If you actually listen to the lyrics, they tell you the story. They tell you exactly where the film's going to end. I mean, not just because that's the name of the place, but how it's brought up. They tell you the third act of the movie. You just have to pay attention. And I think that's brilliant. I think it's clever. And just the orchestration and Adele's voice is just absolutely fantastic. I mean, I remember hearing in interviews Barbara Broccoli saying that they wanted to go for someone who had a Shirley Bassey type grab your attention voice that just draws you right in and just sounds epic. And yeah, that's Adele.
Yeah.
And this performance is just outstanding.
Yes. And she is coming back for the next one. They have announced that she's coming back to sing the next one too. So that's going to be good.
Wow. That I knew about Sam Mendes, but not about Adele. That's cool.
Yeah, Mendes is signed on for the next two, I believe. And they had announced previously, it was a little bit ago, but because people were, talking about it back and forth. There's kind of the camp of, she did a great job, so why not let her do it again? Then there's other people like, oh no, it's time, we got to have a change each time. But why?
But Shirley Bassey did it 3 times.
Yeah.
Granted, she was the only one who did it 3 times, but I think that we have definitely an equal talent to that, without question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you knock it out of the park, you get another at bat. I mean, that's just the way it works, So yeah. I'm fine with it, and I look forward to it.
And she's done multiple knocks out of the park with it, because not only in the film, but to flash back, and this past Academy Awards ceremony was the first one that I watched in over 10 years, because I've become very much disenchanted with them. Mm-hmm. I watched it specifically because I knew they were going to be doing all the Bond 50 stuff.
Right.
And the 2 things that really just made me cheer were when Shirley Bassey came out and did Goldfinger, still sounding amazing, even though she's got to be in her 70s. Still looking pretty good for that too.
It's an amazing thing to me that singers can hold on to their voices for so long while the rest of their body is aging. They can still hold on to those voices for so long, and I think it's obviously it's practice. It's working out those muscles. You keep those muscles worked out, you're going to be able to use them for a long time. But it still kind of amazes me.
I mean, Aretha Franklin, another great example.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I even saw, even going to like older rock bands when I was at the fair this a couple weekends ago, I saw ZZ Top. And they still put on a fantastic show. They still rocked it out of the house. So it was fantastic.
Last year I went to see the Scorpions. And you think, okay, aging rock band did lots and lots of drugs. There's just no way. But no, Hurricane, still sounds like Hurricane. So, but going back to where we were, Adele's performance at the Oscars, I mean, was there any doubt she would have to take home the Oscar after that?
Not in my mind, that's for sure. That definitely seemed to me to be the best song of the year from a theme song for a movie, for sure. Again, it's one that I can just listen to. So
now, with that said, if you want to hear something different, and I know that this may squeak you out if you aren't familiar, because Skyfall by Adele is such an outstanding piece. There was a cover that was released almost concurrently with the movie by a band called Within Temptation. And it is very much more of a harder rock version of it. They're what is politely referred to as a progressive metal band. You could also just call them European rock. Not quite along the same vein as Nightwish, but usually has the same fan base. But if you haven't heard it, Within Temptation does a very, very cool and very well done version of Skyfall. Rock and beat. This is definitely a car chase version of it, but it's worth giving a listen.
I'll definitely check it out. I mean, just to hear it once at least, I'll give it a shot and see what it's all about.
And I would be saying this even if Within Temptation wasn't one of my favorite bands. So,
the music was fantastic, both the score and the original music there, the original songs. It's just, like I said, I can't not gush over this one. I think it's one of the definitely the best, one of my favorites, and could easily take that top spot if I watch it a few more times. So give it a year or so. We'll see when I go to my collection to pull a movie to watch. Which do I reach for first? Is it Skyfall or is it GoldenEye? That's going to be my determination. And right now it's almost a toss up, but we'll give Skyfall a few more watches, and then we'll see if I still want to go back to it, because GoldenEye is one that I've watched a couple dozen times easy, if not more, and I can still go back to it and watch it again and again and again. If Skyfall falls into that category as well, then it could easily jump up into that spot.
The one thing that I will say about the music that gets a slight negative point, and this is the same thing that they did with Casino Royale. If you buy the score, you don't get Adele singing the theme song. You have to buy that as a single. Shitty marketing decision, people. Really? That's just cheap.
Yeah, that's horsewood. The other thing, I believe it was, I want to say it was, I was thinking of the new Star Trek movie. I was about to say they did the same sort of thing with the what do they call it when the exclusives for different retailers. I don't think they did it with Skyfall, but Star Trek Into Darkness, they gave different exclusives, like special features and things, to different retailers. So you couldn't get all of the special features at any one location. You had to go to Best Buy to get this special feature, and Target to get this special feature, and over here to get this special feature. And that's cheap too.
Well, for the months leading up to the release of Skyfall, because not every Bond film had a modern Blu-ray release up to that point. Some had, some hadn't.
Right.
For some time, there were some Blu-ray. You had to go to different stores to get the whole collection until the Bond 50 set came out. Because there were some titles you could only get at Target. There were some titles you could only get at Best Buy. Like, for example, GoldenEye. Best Buy had the exclusive on the Blu-ray for a while. Now, this is not the case anymore, but just for a while, and that annoyed me.
I don't like exclusives. I don't mind when it's like one particular thing exclusive. When it's like, okay, if you get it, you get the movie and these 10 special features if you buy it anywhere. But if you buy it at Best Buy or if you buy it at Target, whatever, the one location where they give an exclusive to, then you also get a special hologram case or maybe one extra, the 11th special feature you get. But splitting it up, that gives that one retailer the option to be like, hey, you get everything if you come to us. But when you split it up and give, okay, we're going to give Best Buy this 5 special features, and we're going to give Target this 5 special features, and we're going to give Walmart this 5 special features. If you want all the special features, you got to buy 3 copies of the movie. That ain't going to happen. I'm not going to do that. There are people who will, but not me. That's more likely to make me be like, you know what? Maybe I could just, since all I'm really getting is the movie either way, maybe I could find another way to get this.
Yeah, me either. And I'm along the same vein. I don't like it when they'll release the Blu-ray of a movie and it's got, hours of special features, and you pick it up, and then 4 months later, the super special edition with even more features. Or, like on iTunes, they'll sometimes release an album, and you get it, and then 4 months later, oh, here's the edition with 4 extra tracks. And you cannot get the 4 extra tracks by themselves. You have to buy the whole damn album again. That sucks.
You guys are really grinding my gears over here. I don't like that. I don't like when they force you to buy new stuff that quickly. I don't mind if it's been, 5 years later, we're going to release another edition with some...
Oh, that's different.
A special 10-year anniversary edition with an extra commentary track or something like that. Okay, cool. Or like a box set where, the new movies come out, so now you can get the last 2 movies or the last 3 movies or whatever in a box set with the new one. That's fine. But yeah, like you said, releasing something and then a month later, special edition, and then a month later, extra special edition, and then a month later, platinum special edition, the unobtainium special edition, or something like that would be coming next. You never know. But yeah. So if you're listening out there, movie industry, don't be cheap. Thanks. Okay.
Now, going back full circle, because occasionally we do remember where we started.
We were talking about Skyfall, right?
We were talking specifically about the scene where Bond represents himself to the world after everybody thought he was dead.
Yes, when he breaks M's edict to never break into her home again.
Yeah, that was very, very nicely done, and I just love the first thing that M does after a hard day. Walks up, pours herself some liquor.
It's very British of her. It seems to be a British thing. It kind of running theme throughout the Bond movies. You always see the Brits are always drinking. But it's always a good drink. It's always classy. It's not like a cheap beer or something like that. It's always something classy. Some scotch or some bourbon or vodka, something.
Well, I did live in English Canada. That might explain something. I don't know.
There you go.
That's what I do.
I watch British TV shows and like Top Gear and Doctor Who, so maybe that explains why I drink so much.
But I like the back and forth. I mean, it's always great when you have Judi Dench and Daniel Craig in the same room. But that particular scene, it just seems especially electric. Especially when she's just so offhand in terms of, where the hell have you been? Like, oh, I wrote your obituary, I mourned you as dead, but, oh, of course you're here. So what the hell, man? I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, especially like when he's like, well, I'll just go home and change then. Well, we sold you flat. All your stuff's in storage. Standard procedure for a dead agent with no relatives. He's like,
well, I guess a hotel. Well, good, because you're not sleeping here.
Exactly. That back and forth is just priceless, and it's so well done between the two of them too. Just the from the moment he walks in, just that he's just looking so haggard at that point. And that's another thing about the acting in this. He was able to pull that off of looking so much older and more haggard than he was just a couple of scenes previously. And then after getting a workout, getting a shower, getting a shave, nice close shave, as even closer in your mind than in my mind, he's suddenly back to looking like Bond again. And it's that transformation is not something that everybody can pull off. So that's pretty cool.
And yet, even when he does look like Bond, he's still not totally acting like Bond, because, of course, he's supposed to have lost several steps over the course of what we're told is the 3 months that he was supposed to be dead. And it's interesting the way he plays that. Like, he's pissed at himself for that happening. Like, when he starts missing the target at the shooting range, he's just finally just stalks up to it like, screw you, target. I'm killing you now.
Yeah, it's really nice to see. I mean, I've always appreciated that about Bond films, is that they were willing to show Bond not necessarily being the best at every little thing. You know, he uses his brains and his gadgets and his wits to circumvent, you know, the things that other people are better than him at. And I think I especially see that in the Daniel Craig Bond. We really see him, you know, when he's chasing somebody down, he's just a step behind, you know, in Casino Royale when he's chasing that parkour guy. And, you know, that other guy's always able to make those jumps just a little bit better than him, but yet he's Bond, so he's able to catch up. He's able to do what he needs to do.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, I think, adaptation that they've made to make him more modern, because I think that a lot of people wanted to see something other than the Marty Stu type archetype. And I think that Daniel Craig's Bond is especially good at pulling that off. And another thing that we see here is that even as he was playing dead, even as he was at least supposedly assuming he would never come back, that he was just going to drink himself to death on a beach on the Black Sea, he kept the fragments of the hard drive that went into his chest when he was shot in his chest. He could have pulled them out at any time, but he kept them as evidence. And then he had the presence of mind to not say anything until later on, when he assessed the situation, figured out who exactly he could trust. And so we're just left with M and Chief of Staff, and that's all he reveals anything to. It's just very much Bond brain there that I find wonderfully done for the script and with how Craig played it.
Yeah, definitely a great scene, seeing him dig that out and be like, here you go, test this. And to be able to pull that off without being cheesy or corny about it. It actually did you really felt that this is something that Bond would do.
And I also felt, as I was watching it this time around, which was now like my fourth time seeing it, I also felt that action on Bond's part may have been the final tipping point for M to decide, no matter how he does on these damn tests, I'm reinstating him.
Right.
Because, of course, we know he failed them, and he failed them quite miserably.
Which is pointed out by probably the one major character in this movie we haven't even discussed yet, the bad guy, the ultimate baddie in this film. And this is another reason I think that I like this movie so much and compare it so closely to GoldenEye in my mind.
Because the plot is taken right from GoldenEye.
You do have these somewhat similar themes going. Let's see. The bad guy is a former agent thought to be dead, face disfigured due to something happening out in the field. There's a few commonalities between them.
Wanted to get some revenge in London.
Exactly. Much more realistic plot line, except for they went a little overboard, I think, with the computer hacking stuff, which movies tend to do when they try to make it a techno thriller with the computer hacking and all that. They do tend to go a little overboard for dramatic effect. I understand why they do it, because people who don't know computers that well honestly think that all that stuff is possible, because all they know about computers is from TV shows and movies where it's dramatized that much. I mean, if you watch CSI Miami, you think computers are amazing things that can do anything you want as long as you just have the right thing. You mean
you pay attention to what the computers are doing and... Oh, okay.
I do just a little bit, just to to see where it's based in reality and where they go off the deep end into complete science fiction, which I don't mind. I don't mind it whatsoever. I prefer my science fiction to be upfront about it. Tell me it's a science fiction movie and show me some science fiction. I'm good to go. Tell me it's.
See, I just keep staring at Emily Proctor when I'm watching CSI Miami, but that's just me.
I'm a much bigger fan of Eva LaRue than Emily Proctor. Goodness, that's the only reason I'm sad that show's gone, as a matter of fact. But anyways, we digress as we do.
We digress. But as far as our bad guy goes, this is where I'm not going to gush as much. Now, we're going to have to split this a little bit.
Okay.
Because Skyfall is one of those movies where you have the difference between plot and story. The plot is the actual mechanism of how we get from point A to point B to point C to point Z, all the way through the line, connecting all of the dots. The story is the actual human interactions and, literary mechanisms by which we get there. So basically how we're following the plot. Okay, basic English class people, I hope you've enjoyed. Now, the story for Skyfall, I think, is fantastic. And I think it goes everywhere it needs to and plays out very, very well. I think that the cast from top to bottom does a fantastic job playing with it. The plot croaks for me the second we meet the bad guy. And I will let go the computer stuff, even though it, as you mentioned, can easily drive a person mad who understands how these things work. Mm-hmm. And how the hackers can does everything, lol. And all the time, it's just, I'll let that go. I'm perfectly capable of letting that go. Otherwise, I'd never be able to enjoy any movie that featured a computer again. But the thing that bothers me is the fast becoming incredibly tired. I mean, not just tired, but dead, buried, dug it up from the ground and buried it again idea of the villain who not only knows what your next move is, but who knows what your next 2,000 moves are and knew it 3.5 months ago and planned it all out perfectly in advance. The thing that bothers me most about this movie is that aspect of our bad guy's character, because somehow he not only knew what was going to happen with M and how MI6 would react and how the British government would react and where they would be holding hearings with her at what time and so on and so forth. And he had to have known that in advance because his escape route was planned to the second. But also that Bond would come get him and all of these things. It reminded me of nothing less than a movie that I absolutely hate, consider one of the worst movies made in the last 10 years, Law Abiding Citizen. I fucking hate that movie. And this is one of the reasons I hate that movie, is because it does this just stupid villain knows everything you're going to do 2,000 years in advance. No.
That's where Law-Abiding Citizen lost me, is the fact that you had this villain who knew everything you were going to do until right at the very end when you were able to get one past him. Ha ha ha. And I was like, you know what? This movie would have been better if the bad guy had gotten away with it. Quite honestly, because at that point it would have been more believable. You know, hey, the bad guy knows everything. He should get away with it at this point.
Well, not only that, but with that particular movie, you ended up where you had a choice. You either had to root for the good guy, the DA, who had been so thoroughly discredited that you couldn't do it anymore, or a terrorist. And everyone is rooting for the terrorist.
Exactly.
What crap. I hate that movie. Now, this one I don't hate on. It's just this particular aspect of it is one of those things that if the rest of the movie weren't so fantastic, I could easily have hated on. And I managed to look past it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that aspect. I was able to look past it as well, but mostly because I attributed it to the fact that he was an agent and the fact that he was part of the mechanism, that he knew how that mechanism was going to work. Now, as far as where the hearing is going to be, that would have obviously been planned out, but probably not in advance enough for those plans to have been made. So, yeah, it was probably public knowledge as to where the hearing would be, but it also wasn't. It wouldn't have been scheduled yet at that point when he started the plan.
Well, that and exactly where are you going to plant the bomb in the train tunnel? As you are quickly escaping and running away from James Bond. Oh, and by the way, you know that MI6 is going to move to this specific location and put you in this very specific isolation room. Oh, just like the isolation chamber in the Philadelphia prison system, by the way, that we conveniently dug a tunnel through. Exact parallel.
Yeah, you have to. My thought process on that is that he still had people in. I mean, again, it's stretching to try to make things fit, but in my mind, the connections are made kind of automatically. When anything doesn't make sense in a movie, for some reason, my brain just automatically tries to fill the gaps. And so I assume that he had people inside, MI6 who gave him information that he wouldn't have had for the current stuff. And then the other stuff he knew. They always had that area already blocked off. This is if MI6 gets attacked or gets something, that building is compromised, all operations move here. That's already established. He knows that. So then he can get that set up. The bomb that he planted in the train tunnel, that could have been planted weeks, months before. He knew that he might need something to block the path. He might not have realized that somebody was going to be right on his tail right there, but eventually they'd figure out which way he went, and that train would be pretty effective at blocking people from going through that direction.
But one, he hasn't been an agent since 1996. 96, 97 is about what we're hearing. So it's been a long, long time. And
well, again, that's where I say he probably had somebody on the inside feeding him information so that he could be like, is this still true? Yes. Okay, good. Then we're going to do this.
And he couldn't have known that someone was going to come after him on the island. It's just so many hoops to jump through.
And on that respect, I think it's just kind of he was laying the breadcrumbs, and as soon as he, that's why, why wouldn't the hitman have been paid in cash? Why was the hitman paid with a casino chip that he had to go?
You see, that makes sense to me, because at that point, you don't actually want to give him the money until the job is done. So the chip is his assurance that he will be paid, but he doesn't really get paid until he's finished.
Right. Well, I understand that makes sense, but then why wouldn't it be? There still should be some checks and balances in place so that if some random person shows up with a chip, they don't just be, here's a few $1 million.
Well, they were going to kill him on his way out. They just wanted to have him interviewed before he walked out with the money. But speaking of going to the casino to get the money and going back yet again to some place where we were a while ago, Bernice Marlowe, the other Bond girl.
Yes.
Admittedly, her character, on the one hand, can be looked at as something of a doormat in terms of she's a victim the entire time we see her. I mean, even when she has power, it's revealed very quickly that she's actually a victim and has been her entire life, because she was raised as a sex slave in Macau and then apparently bought out by our bad guy and has been living in fear of him ever since. But she's played just so well by Bernice Marlowe, and she gets all the aspects of the character, both the I am the supreme queen in power when she's done up in the neo geisha type outfit with the really nice black lipstick, and then as the complete sex object in the shower, of course. Very quick shot if you get it, if you could just don't blink or you'll miss it. Anyway, and then as the resigned to her fate after, they're on the boat that morning and then on the island, I think she plays it very, very well. And that character brought to mind something that I noticed throughout the film, that this not only seems to get influence from Ian Fleming's James Bond, but also from the books of James Clavell, the guy who wrote the Asian Saga, Shogun, Taipan, Noble House, those books. Because the characters and the scenarios that happen in this, the machinations as they go on, and especially this particular character, remind me of stuff that Clavell would have come up with. And I just thought that was very interesting to insert it, and not inappropriate either, because he was very much a British Empire novelist.
Right. That was definitely well done. I definitely don't disagree there.
And of course, I also can't disagree with James Bond's assessment after our bad guy shoots.
Oh, don't even bring that up. Such a waste.
Waste of good scotch.
50-year-old McClellan. Do you know how much that stuff costs?
I know how much just standard Macallan costs. I don't even want to know how. Well, yeah, I do want to know how much 50-year-old Macallan costs.
Well, I know
I'm not going to be able to afford it, but
yeah, the 50-year-old McClellan, I've actually never seen it in a store because, it's not something that you would just have in a store. It's something that basically you just kind of, if you've got it, you've got it. Otherwise, you better hope somebody who's got it maybe decides to sell it, because you don't get a lot of it. It's not the most expensive bottle of scotch in the world. The most expensive bottle is actually a 50-year-old bottle of Chivas, which was specifically distilled for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth and was not bottled until it had been aged for 50 years, and it was only one cask of it, which means there was only about 355 bottles total. That's it. So
I would hope they gave one to the Queen.
I believe they gave several, actually. And it's I think it's in the neighborhood of $100,000 a bottle for the 50-year-old Chivas. And that's if you can find somebody who's selling at the time. That's kind of on my list if I ever win one of these multi-million-dollar lotteries. I want to buy 2 bottles of that, one to keep and one to drink, because I really want to taste that. It's got to be so good.
I can imagine.
But the McClellan 50-year-old, they do have, there's a little bit more of it out there, so it's a little bit cheaper. It's only around $17,000 a bottle.
Oh, let me go out and get that tomorrow. I was going to get some whiskey anyway.
And like I said, that's if you can even find it, because it's not guaranteed to be out there. It's one of those things because it's not being produced anymore. It's not being bottled anymore. That's it. It's done. It's over with until they age some more. I don't know if they've got casks that they're holding on to, but yeah, $17,000 approximate average price if you can find it for sale there. I gotta imagine that's so damn smooth. Oh my goodness.
I think I'll stick with stuff that's 12 to 18 years old. Thank you. That's more my budget.
Well, and it's very good too. It's not, it's that range. If you're looking between $30 and $50 a bottle, you're still getting very good scotch. You don't have to go into the extreme ranges. Now, the most expensive scotch I've ever actually tasted myself is the Johnny Walker Blue Label, which runs about $250 a bottle. I did not have a bottle of it. A friend was given a bottle as a bonus for a big sale at his work, and he didn't even like scotch. He wouldn't give me the damn bottle. But he did give me a glass of it, and it was amazing.
I will agree that the Johnny Walker Blue is amazing. I also would count that as the most expensive scotch I've ever had, and I stuck my employer with that bill. Only a glass. Not a whole bottle. It was on a business trip, and the expense accounts were open and included alcohol. So I gave them the itemized receipt. They signed off on it.
Like, all right. Well, it had to be $50-$60 a glass. Easy, if not more.
It was expensive. It was about as expensive as the steak, except the steak was horrible, whereas the scotch was not.
There you go. So definitely we wholeheartedly agree that spilling a single drop of that precious liquid, also her blood, I mean, that was unnecessary, but a single drop of that precious golden delicious liquid would be a waste, and a whole shot of it, oh, come on.
Which is just showing again how dastardly our bad guy is.
Some movies and TV shows, they show the bad guy, killing a dog or kicking a kid or something like that to make you really hate him. You're like, oh, I really hate this guy. I don't care about all the stealing and murdering of other people he's done, but he kicked a dog, man. This guy's going down. For us, that was this moment. When he spilled that scotch, we're like, ooh, this guy. Oh, I don't like him.
Yeah, I mean, it's the absurd extension of don't cry over spilled milk, it could have been beer. No, don't cry over spilled milk, it could have been 50-year-old scotch!
Exactly. So, yeah, we definitely concur with the statement he made there. It was apropos. And it showed Bond's detachment there. And I think Daniel Craig played that very well, because while he was making a point of, I'm going to make a comment about the scotch and not even mention that he just killed the woman I slept with right now, he's going to, you could still kind of see it in his eyes that it did still upset him, which I love. Yeah. Because he shouldn't be. Bond is not supposed to be a complete sociopath. He's got to be a little bit of one, because otherwise he couldn't do the job. But he can't be a complete sociopath, or we wouldn't want to root for him.
Well, that, and he'd have no sense of duty if he was a complete sociopath.
Exactly.
And he obviously does. So, and I also don't think it's unrealistic that he would have missed his shot with the pistol and then been so accurate with the handgun shortly afterwards. And the reason I say that, of course, is because those were old dueling pistols.
Yes.
Well, and those kinds of pistols, you can be the best shot in the world, and the nature of those guns shooting cap and ball, it's impossible to assume you're going to get an accurate shot. You just can't assume that. It's not like a modern handgun.
Well, yeah, you're not dealing with, first of all, you're dealing with possible differing loads of gunpowder. You're dealing with possible imperfections in the balls, because they didn't use perfectly formed steel balls. They used cast iron balls that had a seam on them. So they quite often...
And if you have bad balls and they've got a seam in, you've got trouble.
Exactly. There's problems. You got to get that checked, especially if you're over 40. You got to go have that checked out. But no, I agree. The only advantage the dueling pistols had is their longer barrels. That would make for a little bit better accuracy than a shorter barreled version of the same thing. But no, the modern handguns are definitely going to be far more accurate. Plus, he was making those shots at a much shorter range as well. She was way off from there. And obviously, he was erring on the side of caution and shooting high, instead of shooting low. So I don't I don't necessarily think that he missed on purpose, but I do know that he wasn't making every effort to make the shot either.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that he was trying to err on the side of caution and go higher than lower. But I did want to say that I didn't think it was an inconsistency.
No, definitely not with that type of weaponry, and at that range, it was consistent.
Yeah, and then going further back to our introduction to our bad guy, we come full circle eventually. We do. We try. I like how he was introduced. I like the long speech, and I like the establishing shot while he's making the speech of him coming down the elevator and slowly walking down the long hallway. We ignore that it's a crappy server room. And where he starts out, as a small figure on the camera and gets bigger and bigger. And Javier Bardem is just an outstanding actor. So the way that he's delivering it is just wonderful. And I like the Zorro Gay Blade version of the character that he plays. I think that's a very well done touch. I think that giving him a unique persona, I think really plays well.
I definitely agree. I thought that for what that was probably the only complaint I had on this movie was the way that this bad guy was written, in the way that you said, how he knew too much for how long he'd been out of the game. But yeah, I can explain it away in my own brain if I have to, but it still bugs me that I have to do that. But I think Javier Bardem did the best he could possibly do with it, and he made that role better than the writing. And that is something really powerful that actors very rarely can do.
Yeah, he definitely made the role better than the writing when it was bad, in terms of, and by bad I mean the part that we've been harping about, but he also made it better than the writing when it was good. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking specifically the climactic scenes at Skyfall.
Yes, that ending scene, that whole the Battle of Skyfall, I like to call it because it sounds impressive, is just such a fantastic scene from start to finish. From the beginning, when just the three of them are there, boarding up the windows, setting booby traps, figuring out what they're going to do, because they know they're going to be hit and hit hard, and they know they've got to fight back for just long enough to get away through the secret passageway. And they do such a fantastic job of it. Now, the one complaint I have on there is that at the very end, when he does blow up the building completely, we see no less than 5 explosions, possibly more, from the one stick of dynamite he tied to a couple of cans of propane.
You're also
don't
assuming
get that many explosions. Damn it.
I'm going to give it a little bit more there, because you're assuming not only the explosions he set off there, but secondary, tertiary, and so on explosions from the impact of the helicopter, the ammunition in the helicopter going off, any rockets it had left going off, its fuel going off, and anything else it may have hit that would have been explosive in the place, like maybe a stove, gas line, who knows?
I don't know. It just seemed a little bit... It was one of those few moments where it kind of took me out of the movie for a second to think, oh, come on now. I understand when a car crashes and they have it explode because you're meant to assume, okay, gas tank, whatever. But houses don't have 5 gas tanks. It's not going to explode in that manner. It was obviously a planned demolition at this point. A small complaint. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of digging to find anything to complain about in this movie, and that's one of them, is just the overuse of explosions in that particular scene. Now, it was necessary, for him to be like, well, he can't be in there, but he obviously wouldn't have killed himself either. That way, at that point, the bad guy knows something's up.
Well, plus the other part of that is we have Bond definitely distancing himself from his past. Like, I never liked that place anyway. I'm glad it's finally gone. And I think we have the dual metaphor here of we are acknowledging the past. So we're acknowledging the classic Bond series that came before Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. Mm-hmm. And we're acknowledging it. We're bowing our heads to it. We're saying nice things about it. And then we are absolutely freaking annihilating it so that we can go on to making a real series that may be full of standalone movies now, instead of this, okay, we've done our due diligence. We have now reintroduced the Bond character, not just in a way to make Daniel Craig acceptable to you, but to make our new Bond acceptable to you, so that after we squeeze another couple movies out of Daniel Craig, which is probably all we're going to get, then we have this established so that the next actor can carry on. So this, to me, the whole point of Skyfall is to sew up the introduction of the new Bond and to establish the franchise.
Right.
That, to me, is the whole point of this movie.
Absolutely, and they do such a fantastic job of it, too. I mean, not only in the transition, to show, okay, now we've established this Bond character, but they're also giving us a new M. They're finally separating from the last remaining thing that tied them to the old franchise in any way, shape, or form, and they sever that as well, which is sad on one hand because Judi Dench is so fantastic. However, Ralph Fiennes is also a fantastic actor, so I am looking forward to seeing him as M. For
Ralph Fiennes is a fantastic choice, absolutely, and it's unfortunate because not only are we losing Judi Dench because it's time for the character to go, but her health is also starting to fail in her eyesight, and that's a sad thing. And she was having a harder time. She was perfectly willing to go through with it, and she, of course, still has her successful acting career. She's not quitting or anything, but just she's got more limits now that she has to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's a great way to pass the torch, to be like, okay, we've done this series, we've tied it back enough to the old series so that everybody knows that it's part of it, but now we really are completely our own entity. And speaking of a new M, for the first time, I think, in any of the movies, we do get a brief glimpse of M's real name. Did you have to catch that?
You know what his real name is before he actually becomes M.
Well, I'm not talking about Mallory, who's obviously going to be M now, and M can either be just the randomly assigned initial, or it can still be. But we know from Casino Royale that at least one of her names starts with M. When he's given the box with that stupid bulldog figurine in it, it has a name printed on it. It's Olivia Mansfield. So we find out what M's name has been all along, at least in...
Which is also interesting because that's not the name that she had as M in the Pierce Brosnan films. Then her name was supposed to have been Barbara Maudsley. So they changed her name.
Well, I think that's, again, we are starting, even though they took the same actress to play that character, it was another differentiation. It was another, we're separating this from that. Even though we're using the same actress because just freaking amazing. So we're going to use the same actress, but it's still a different character. And I think she played it a little different as well.
I think she did too.
Drastically, but very, very well.
Yeah, Judi Dench is definitely going to be missed in any future films because she was absolutely amazing and is absolutely amazing and will always be absolutely amazing because that's the wonderful thing about film. You live forever that way.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I definitely will miss seeing her in the films. Hopefully she does continue to be able to do things for as long as possible. It will be sad when she does eventually retire completely from acting, but until then we always have these movies to go back to, and especially these last three, from Casino Royale on to Skyfall. Definitely just amazing examples of her ability.
And then, of course, as you mentioned, Ralph Fiennes, I think excellent choice, outstanding actor. And I know I've heard interviews with him. He's very happy to have taken the role, and he is signed on for several, so we don't have to worry about losing him. And I think the dynamic will be very interesting. And you don't quite know where he's going to go because at first he looks like he's going to be antagonistic, and yet he understands how the field goes. Like you have the very telling scene where Q is laying down his breadcrumbs and Mallory catches him at it and basically says, well, then you better do a good job or we're all buggered, so carry on.
Exactly. Yeah, you get that sense where he knows all the rules, and when it's appropriate, he's going to make them follow them. But he also knows when the rules do need to be bent and even broken. So I think it's going to be a really good... it'll be a really good relationship between him and Bond, quite honestly. I don't think we're going to see the clashing as much, which will be slightly missed because that banter back and forth is part of what makes Bond Bond, but we don't want to see the exact same banter between him and Mallory's M as we did from the other M, because otherwise it's just like, well, now you're just swapping the part, but it's still the same exact person. We don't want that. So it will be interesting to see how they play their relationship.
Yeah, I think we're going to get an interesting amalgam of M as we saw him in the Connery days and M of Judi Dench in Daniel Craig. I think it's going to be somewhere in between those, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I hope so. I'm really looking forward to the future of the franchise. I don't think they're done by a long shot. I think they've got a lot of Bond left in them. I think they need to, like you said, no reason not to crank them out every couple of years, really. I mean, yeah, maybe with current filmmaking and the requirements thereof, maybe you can't do one every single year. But
pull a Lord of the Rings, make 2 or 3 at a time. Come on.
But every other year at least. I mean, there's no reason, and hopefully we'll see them get back to that. I mean, this was between, I believe, between
4 years.
Yes.
That's what you're looking for. A presidential administration. In fact, exactly a presidential administration, because it was election years.
Between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, there was 4 years space, which was almost the same amount of time as has been between major cast changes. This is the longest break that we've had with the same Bond, I believe. Is that correct?
With the same Bond, yes.
Okay. And it makes you wonder. And I really don't want to wait until 2016 for another one, so they need to speed this up a bit.
Well, the other thing, too, and this is another behind-the-scenes craw that we've only kind of mentioned in passing because it's one of those things where it's interesting trivia, but not necessarily interesting enough. I really hope that the studios are done with their financial troubles, lawsuits, and all that kind of thing, and they can just get to the business of making frickin' movies again.
That'd be fantastic. That would be great. I'm sure the behind-the-scenes fighting over that sort of thing never really ends. I'm sure it's always there, but they need to just forget about it. Just forget about it. Come on.
Well, that, and as far as the money trouble thing goes, come on. We know that even the crappiest Bond movie makes a shit ton of money.
Exactly.
So just make it. I mean, don't make a crappy one. I'm just saying that no matter how the Bond movie turns out, it will make money. So you might as well make the Bond movie.
Yes. And
we'd rather they make the best ones they can, like this one. But
yes, absolutely. And I think Daniel Craig, if they can get these movies cranked out a little bit quicker, I think he's got several movies left in him. He could easily be one of the longest running Bonds if they could get them, but he won't be if they put 4 years between every movie. If they do it every 4 years, he's only going to get 1, maybe 2 more. And then we're going to have old Bond again. And nobody wants old Bond. Nobody wants that. The gold Bond, old Bond. We don't want that. We don't want Bond using gold Bond. That's not.
We don't want Bond making Shaq look supple.
Yeah. Yes, that is not what we're looking for. But Craig.
Though, speaking of, kind of, what did you think of the flirt scene at the very beginning with Javier Bardem and Daniel Craig? I thought that was so very well played and very well written.
Yes, I definitely agree with that, because it was one of those scenes where it was obvious that that Bardem's character was trying to get a rise out of him, and not that way, you know what I mean? He was trying to freak him out, trying to test his, basically he's thinking, Bond's thinking I'm going to come over here and hurt him, punch him, kick him, maybe swatted his balls with a rope knotted at the end or something like that. He's not going to expect me to come onto him and start stroking his face and unbuttoning his shirt and stuff like that. So I think it was his attempt to get in Bond's brain, and Bond just played it off perfectly. He was just like, you're not going to get to me like this or any other way. You're not going to freak me out. So.
And just the line that had so many people's jaws drop. What makes you think this is my first time? And you never know. He went to college. So I just thought that was a very interesting scene to throw in there. I mean, it's, that at the very least, Bardem's character is not gay. He's because he has female lovers. So at the very least, he's bisexual, which is entirely possible.
And even with that, I don't necessarily think that.
And he doesn't necessarily have to be even bisexual. It, like you said, it could just be a come on to get to him. Yeah. But it's just interesting that they would even go there.
Yeah. No, I really like that, because it was a different approach to torture, basically. I mean, for many straight guys, it would be nearly torture to be in a situation where you're tied to a chair or, incapacitated in some way, and have a guy make advances on you that you didn't want.
I unfortunately know many guys for whom this would be their equivalent of hell. Yeah.
It's, for me, I'd be like, hey, thanks for the compliment. I appreciate it. I'm not interested. Sorry. But, hey, points to my ego.
Yeah, at least somebody thinks so. Great.
You have any female friends you want to tell? Yeah, I think it was just, I personally, as far as the character, whether he was gay or not goes, I doubt it, or even bi. I think it was just a matter of seeing if he could get under Bond's skin that way. And the fact that Bond not only played it off, but did it so well, kind of shut that down right there.
Yeah, because you notice nothing like that ever happened again. But it was, I just thought it was very nicely written.
And very well played, so...
Yeah, and again, Bardem just did a really great job with everything that he was handed. Daniel Craig puts in yet another awesome performance. And Jen, we only touched on briefly Ben Whishaw as Q. I thought very good casting choice to go with the younger guy. Makes complete sense for the modern day and age.
And I do actually like, even though I'm a big fan of Bond gadgets. I love Bond gadgets. I the wackier the better for me, honestly, I do. But in the context of the current Bond that we're seeing, the current incarnation of Bond, he doesn't need wacky gadget. Just a little bit above the ordinary is fine. Like having a defibrillator in your car. Okay, that's a little bit, most people don't have that. Some might, but most people don't. But the fact that it's standard issue in his car, okay, that's a gadget, essentially. Having a radio tracker, having a gun that fires only to his palm print. Biometric guns do exist. They are extremely expensive and not very reliable, but they do exist, so I'll give him that. But it's still a gadget, but it's not a wacky gadget. It's not an exploding pen. It's not a belt buckle, grappling hook and cable or anything like that.
And then, of course, we have the one that leads to one of the better lines in the film, even though there are lots of good lines in the film. It's the latest thing from Q Branch. It's a radio.
Yes, which of course now we know was all part of the plan, but still, it was a very clever line, and the fact that that was the only thing he was given. And again, with this current incarnation of Bond, he just doesn't need the wacky gadget. He
didn't even get the shoe to hide it in.
Yeah, he just had the radio itself. He must have just had it in his pocket or on his keyring or something.
Yeah, because on the boat you saw him quickly pull it out, turn it on, and put it back.
Yeah.
If you blink, you miss it, but it's there. I didn't catch it the first time I saw the movie. I only caught it starting after that, but...
Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, I like the gadgets, but they'd be out of place in this Bond universe. So I'm glad that they're going with, while they're still bringing Q back. Like, I appreciated that they didn't have Q and Moneypenny in Casino Royale. And, Barbara Broccoli even made a point, because she was asked about it. People were like, hey, how come you don't have Q or Moneypenny? Oh, what the heck? And she's like, well, those characters weren't in the book Casino Royale, so why do they belong in the movie?
Yeah, and they didn't really fit the story for Quantum of Solace either.
Right, and that's totally fine. I'm glad they're back, because I do like the characters, and I like the take on the characters that we're seeing. I'm glad they're not just gone from the universe, but I'm glad they have changed to fit better into the new Bond universe. So I'm quite happy with what they've done with it.
Yeah, and as we both mentioned early on in the show, I'm quite happy with what they did with this entire movie. It's not perfect by any means. However, it is so damn good, it doesn't have to be perfect to be one of, at the very least, it sits in the top half. We'll be more specific about that later on.
Yes.
Of course, Eric has already thrown his hat in the ring, I think.
Right now, I've kind of made it obvious. When we're just talking about now, when we do our lists episodes, we'll have different lists that will include which ones we think are the quote-unquote best as compared to which ones are our favorite. These are not the same things. Right now, I've already declared that GoldenEye is my favorite, and as of right now, still is. But Skyfall definitely has the potential to take over that spot. And who knows, by the time we do that episode, maybe that will have been the case. But as far as the best movies list, that's going to be an entirely different discussion, because I'm going to take my personal favorites out of the mix and just talk about the movies themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think we can do that in the same show, just differentiate between things.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure we can make that happen.
But speaking of next shows, is there anything else that you have to add about Skyfall before we conclude for this evening?
No, I believe we hit all the points that I wanted to hit. Yeah, that's it.
All right, so I think what we've come up with is somewhat flawed movie, but you don't care how flawed it is because it's so damn good. And just absolutely worth owning, worth seeing on the highest definition screen you can find. Awesome music, awesome soundtrack, great acting. Just the byplay between Daniel Craig and Judi Dench is outstanding.
Yes, quite. I mean, everything about this movie for me was very well done. Even the points that we discussed as being not fantastic were still good. Like I said, there really wasn't anything in here that made me go, oh, no. It was more just like, okay. So it's kind of a personal preference thing. You know, how much can you overlook and still enjoy the movie? I definitely enjoyed this movie to the fullest. So highly recommend it.
Yes, very highly recommended. And that, drumroll everybody, concludes our movie-by-movie run through the 007 series. I hope you've enjoyed it. However, that does not conclude Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. As we've hinted to on many occasions, including just 2 minutes ago, we still have a long way to go in our discussions of the James Bond series. And in our next episode, we're going to be asking the question, who is James Bond? Just discussing what is essential to making up the character of James Bond. And during the course of that discussion, we will also be discussing our personal rankings of who is the best James Bond out there. I will tell you right now, my list is going to surprise you.
All right. I'm really looking forward to that because it's going to be a little bit more, I mean, if you can believe it, it'll be a little bit more free-form discussion than even what you've just heard. I know that sounds shocking considering how many tangents we go on, but we won't even have a specific movie to tie us down. We'll be able to jump all over the entire universe, and it's going to be fun. So I'm looking forward
to it. In fact, if you guys want to play along with a bet for us, make a suggestion of a non-James Bond movie that we have to mention during the episode, and we'll see what we can do for you.
Yes. You can do that, of course, by visiting us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/HerMajesties.Pod. You can also visit our website, HerMajesties.Pod.com. And, of course, follow us on Twitter. We are at HerMajesties.Pod, of all things. If you want to email me directly, I'm Eric at HerMajesties.Pod, or on Twitter at Eric J. Dewey.
And as mentioned earlier in the show, you can find me on Twitter at CinemaOTR, and you can email me at Ziggy@CinemaOnTheRocks.com. And if you'd like to read some of the reviews I've written of many of the James Bond movies and many more movies and web series, you can visit me at CinemaOnTheRocks.com. Do it. However, that's going to be it for this episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. I am Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And we will see you next time for more bondage.
This has been another great presentation by the 4-Eyed Radio Network. You can find more information at 4eyedradio.com.